Welcome, everyone, to the first podcast by Cacao, where we will be discussing a series of different topics. The first episode will be about tasting, the second will be about post-harvest, and the third will be on sourcing and social responsibility. I'm here today with Max Wax, Nadia, Rizek, and Damion Badalamenti. Max is the creative concept director for Cacao. He was born in Italy, grew up in Brazil, has worked in Africa, and is now in the Dominican Republic, where he's dedicated to the modernization of the cacao industry and the production of craft chocolate. Nadia is fifth generation of the Rizek family, who continues to honor the century-long cacao legacy that is committed not only to growing and processing high-quality beans, but that also celebrates the wide range of flavor profiles that we have been able to develop. And then we have Damion. Damion is responsible for the delicious smell of chocolate as soon as you enter our concept store in New York, where he's created a complete range of bold and exciting chocolates with a variety of our single origin flavor profiles. Damion is a New York City native with over 20 years of experience in the chocolate industry around Europe and the US, and he specializes in the development of fine chocolates and pastries while implementing cacao's unique flavor profiles.
Wow. What an introduction. Okay, just a few words about Rizek Cacao, about what we have done in the last 20 years. Basically, we have inherited 20 years ago a clean slate. Cacao was the same; it has been for centuries and centuries, and so there were so many things that could be done, and we tried to improve in all senses, from the agricultural part through genetic selection, and then a little bit of science in part that concerns fermentation and drying of cacao. There's lots of microbiology, lots of very deep science there. And we tried to get some useful knowledge. And then the techniques for transformation of cacao, the fermentation itself, material, and the way to do it in a more modern way, but respecting the tradition. So this is basically our approach, being innovative and true to cacao from the very farms up to chocolate, which is an addition that came just 10 years ago.
So hello, I'm Nadia, and I'm going to be talking about Cacao USA, which is our latest project, and with the purpose of serving and promoting the craft chocolate industry in the US and abroad. Cacao USA brings in a few containers a year of cacao beans and other semi-finished cacao products such as butter, cacao powder, liquor or mass, and nibs, allowing us to provide to small chocolate makers with no minimum order quantity. Cacao USA also opened a concept store in Brooklyn. It is a workshop and a space. It is a one-stop shop for chocolate makers and chocolate lovers, and chocolate makers in the quest of the finest ingredients. We opened the store basically with two main goals. First is education, educating consumers on cacao and chocolate. You can find many of the best craft chocolate brands from different parts of the world and made with different cacao beans from around the world. And you also can find a live feed of our farms in Dominican Republic and the live feed of a fermentation center in Dominican Republic as well. So we really want to show people the whole process and the work that goes into making a good chocolate bar.
Yes, now you're seeing a beautiful picture of the concept store, which is where Damion is right now.
Exactly. There's also an open factory space there in our workshop where you can see the chocolate being made with full transparency. And the second goal of the store is showing the potential of Dominican cacao. So we make chocolate in this store to show the potential of Dominican beans. Something we really want people to learn is that one country does not mean one flavor, but rather there are thousands of cacao varieties in the Dominican Republic, as Max was saying about innovation, that we could uncover a palette of nuanced flavors and aromas. And this is something that you can test yourself by going to the store and trying out different chocolate bars from our collection. And you can see that each one is so unique and different, and all made from beans from Dominican Republic. It is an ideal space for chocolate makers to go try chocolate and see what beans they would love to use. And so we're going to be tasting 3 of these chocolates today. The 3 of them are all single estate. Max will be telling a little bit about each of those estates, and then Damon will be leading our tasting of those 3 chocolates.
Yes. Also, it is important to point out that in our New York store, you will find also, and very importantly, the chocolates of our fellow chocolate makers, which are our clients. So it's not just a place where we exhibit our own chocolate, but on the contrary, where we harbor all our fellow chocolate makers with lots of passion.
And it's also part of the education of showing different beans from different parts of the world, and showing how so many beans can be used in chocolate.
Yes. The 3 chocolates that we are going to taste today with the help of Damion are all denominations of origin, which is a new approach in cacao. We can show you the picture probably of the map.
So as you guys see this picture and Max is telling you about this, I really wanted to have the team explain how far we've gone into this single origin concept, because before it used to be all about cacao coming from different countries, but now we've managed to go even deeper. So we not only talk about single origin, but we also talk about single estate, which is what we're going to see today.
Exactly. It is very important to point out the difference between a commercial name, which is, for example, I decide to call my chocolate because I want to with a certain name, like, I don't know, Rio Caribe or Rio Bonito, and an official denomination of origin. Legally, in the Dominican Republic, so far, there are just 2 denominations of origin, which are the ones that you're seeing on screen, which is El Ramonal and Los Bejucos. Denomination of origin is a means to having the farmers participate in the value that is created by the chocolate maker. It creates and confirms a very special bond that exists between the terroir and the rural communities and the final product. So this, in a way, it fills the gap that always exists between the producer and the consumer.
So Damion, tell us a little bit about how you work with these flavor profiles once you receive the cacao beans in New York.
Well, the process starts a little bit maybe sometimes before that. Working with the quality control team down in San Francisco de Macorís. I often have questions. I always have lots of questions. I like to answer questions. I like to, figure out what new bean recipes are being developed, what sort of flavor profiles they are. For some reason in my career, I've worked a lot. Just sort of happened a lot with Dominican cacao. So it's the cacao I'm most familiar working with. And the things that always strike me the most about flavor for Dominican cacao is how fruit forward it is. It tends to have a very strong amount of acidity, and there's quite a bit of astringency, sometimes some bitterness, depending on the type. But the fruit is always very, very big. It can be very, very dominant. So it's always interesting to first hear maybe a little preemptively about, what potential flavors might be coming in from a new bean. And then once they come, my approach, we've been open basically a year for all intents and purposes. And about a year, a little bit, maybe 13 months since our roaster was turned on, and the fire department here let us do that. Very nice of them to do. And, one of my first agendas here with the flavor here was to really promote that concept of fruit forward. And, there's a lot of people out there that love, Madagascar-based chocolates and some other areas. And those are well known. But Dominican cacao in and of itself has a very, very strong fruit flavor and rather unique. And there's a lot of depth and a lot of complexity in that. So for the basically this past year, as beans were coming in and it was important to create a representation of these recipes in chocolate format, my initial agenda was to really promote that, how to make chocolate that really allow the fruit component of that cacao to really express and really be at the forefront. And, that's not just formulating the chocolate itself, which is, quite easy. I think at the end of the day, you're only working with 3 or 4 different numbers. But then how do you roast? How do you grind? How do you conch? There's an aging component to this, something that's not often talked about, but aging really comes in. And so, different people do a lot of different aging styles. We do it here once the chocolate is made because of our storage and stuff. It's more efficient to do that way. And once chocolate is made, we'll age it for a period and until we reach a certain balance and to allow that to express. And that's how it's been for the past year. Interestingly, though, as our beans have been getting into the hands of some really top quality makers, especially here in North America, and sampling some of their approaches, it's always exciting to see how different the flavor potential can be. Like I said, I've had an agenda this past year, and I think we've been pretty successful, pretty happy. People seem to be pretty excited with it. But now tasting some of our clients' stuff, working with the same exact bean in the same exact lot number, harvest, and everything, and to see their approach. I'll taste it, and it's very familiar to me because I know these beans well at this point.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to see the different style, and it's inspired me to do a bit of the same, to really branch out now that we've addressed the fruity character, the fruity nature of Dominican cacao in the hybrids that are there. Now, how can we turn that in process and create maybe other flavors, maybe bring in more Maillard or focus more on the sort of a chocolate core, allowing the fruit component to be secondary or tertiary for a flavor, because other people have other mentalities and other approaches, especially people working with other types of cacao. They're bringing inspiration from other flavor profiles. So now the experiment is, now as we're getting into second and third generations of a single batch of chocolate, maybe we can make some changes. Let's see how versatile this is. And that's really the idea.
And I think that's something that we want to show with the store, Damion, like showing how many different profiles we can make with beans all coming from Dominican Republic.
Absolutely.
This box that we have right in front of us is the best example.
This is our complete collection.
So as Damion was mentioning, cacao has been open in New York for about a year, and we've been able to produce, well, the box says 15, but there's actually more. But here you can see 15, there's over like 20 different chocolate bars. But here you guys can see 50 different craft chocolate bars, and this is all dark chocolate. I have to also mention this. There is no milk in any of this. This is all dark craft chocolate, handcrafted in our factory store in New York. So here in the middle, you guys can see the 3 single estates, which are the ones that are the topic of conversation today. And I'd like to kick off the conversation with maybe Max can tell us a little bit about La Esmeralda and why it's such a special estate, not just for cacao, but also for the Rizek family.
Yes, La Esmeralda is our flagship farm. It's very well known worldwide. It is a beautiful farm with a spacing of 4x4 traditional. You'll soon see a few pictures of it. It is designed with the precision of Roman columns. It is absolutely parallel to every tree is parallel to the other, designed beautifully, beautiful drainage. And it is one of the farms with the new genotype that was brought into the Dominican Republic in the late 60s from Trinidad and Tobago. So genetically speaking, it's also then the first generation Trinitario clones. It is very, very special. It has a very unique fruity flavor, and it has been interpreted, thus to say, by 3 notable chocolate makers, and we are now confronting them and comparing our skill to theirs. These are Veltlin. Veltlin makes a Don Nazario single estate chocolate. Veltlin is a very traditional Swiss chocolate maker, and then Barry Callebaut as well introduced it into its gourmet line a couple of years ago, and there are already two different vintages of La Esmeralda made by Rizek cacao, and now we are at the second generation of La Esmeralda made by cacao by Mr. Damion Badalamenti, and we'll have the pleasure of tasting it here with you. La Esmeralda technically is inside the Los Bejucos denomination of origin. However, it is a chateau, so we mention it as La Esmeralda instead of Los Bejucos. Tireo is not far from La Esmeralda, just a few hundred meters, but incredibly enough, it has a completely different character, and the craftsmanship of the chocolate maker and that of the farmer have to, let's say, enhance and let shine the characteristics of these fantastic cacaos.
So before we move on, I want Max to mention another name that is very well known for the Tireo farm, that most chocolate lovers are very aware of, which is the very famous chocolate by Michel Cluzel.
Ah, yes, of course. Very famous Los Ancones by Michel Cluzel. And Los Ancones is the sister of Tireo. They basically coincide in part of that farm. That was the first estate cacao made in the Dominican Republic back in 2002. Absolutely.
So, Damion, tell us a little bit more about, we've heard a little bit about the farms and the plantations, even the architecture of these cocoa farms. Tell us a little bit about what you have in your hands, about the chocolate, about the profile, about working with these beans.
Well, right off the bat, it's interesting to hear. I actually learned just something very new from Max about La Esmeralda, so the history and the bringing in the clones from Trinidad. I had not heard that part of the history before. I say on a purely mechanical, sort of physical way, the beans of Esmeralda are really probably my favorite physical bean to play with here. I'm not going to lie about that. They're huge. They're very large, very smooth skin. They remind me of river stones. And when you open these boxes and bags of this bean, you can really tell that this farm, just from the beans alone, that this farm is very well manicured and very well tended. The trees are very mature, and they continue to be productive even after it's been decades. And you could really see that in the bean. Not talking about flavor or anything like that, just the physicality of the bean itself. It's a real delight to work with. It winnows wonderfully, great returns on that. It can handle different levels of roasting really interestingly and processing. So out of all the beans I've, had the pleasure of working with the past year on a physical level, technical level, the Esmeralda is definitely one of my faves, for sure. You could tell a lot about the intention of the farm and the way it's really maintained, just in the beans alone. It's interesting, the approach that I've been introduced to from everybody at Cacao and the larger Rizek corporation, just sort of their approach to, trying to make this more of a profitable business for everybody, the farmers, the people on the ground, all the way up in the chain, to try to make it more sustainable for the future. Learned some interesting things just about sort of the larger business from Max, and just to see how there's an opportunity there in the Dominican Republic to really play with that, how to adjust traditional spacings, how to work with cloning technology, how to, prune, how to adjust some of the traditional concepts around light and shadow with regards to the cultivation and maintenance of these trees. And, DR is a small country, but it's very, very rich agriculturally for cacao. And so there's a lot of opportunity to see that in action, and it's a very interesting thing.
Absolutely. And then the third farm is La Magdalena.
Baptized by Max. Please tell us a little bit about the name of this estate.
It was the day where we bought the farm. That day was the day of Saint Magdalene, and then La Magdalena.
So I really like to say the way that Max always describes to us this cacao profile, which is, it begins with our crowning achievement. So tell us a little bit about why this is one of our crowning achievements.
In the Dominican Republic, cacao is not native to our country, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. And the big advantage that it was brought in several historic phases, historic waves. And La Magdalena, to my knowledge, is the only and the first successful attempt to recreate and breed back the ancient varieties that were brought into the Dominican Republic since the 16th century. So by then, the Spaniards, who used to rule the entire region, had other colonies where the cacao, yes, it was native. And those were basically Venezuela, Ecuador, and Colombia. Now you're seeing some images about the grafting, which is part of the recreation of those ancient varieties. Basically, it took us 10 years, but we were able to come up with 10 clones, which are the almost exact reproduction of what was brought into the Dominican Republic in the 16th century. It's a completely light-breaking cacao, which means that when you cut open the beans, instead of being purple or purplish brown, they are absolutely white, and the flavor is really very different. I think that Damion will be able to describe it with galore of adjectives, but basically it's a bit more almond-like, It has less bitterness to it. And it allows for very, very high percentages of cacao, maintaining a very attractive, like sandy-like type of color.
I want to say that we're actually working, well, Damon can talk a little bit more about it, but he's actually working on doing 4 different Magdalena profiles so that we can really, you can really compare the difference between each percentage using the same bean and the difference in the process. Damon can talk a little bit more about that, but we'll be releasing it for the holiday season.
So we have 4, or about to have 4 chocolate bars with cacao coming from this single estate. And Max talks about how he's so surprised and, just in awe of the white beans. And now I want Damion to tell me a little bit about how he's so surprised of the same aspect regarding color, but in the chocolates that he's making.
With Magdalena specifically, or just in general?
With Magdalena.
We're telling us off camera about this, the 90% that you are developing, and you say it is amazing.
It's basically finished grinding about 10 minutes ago. I turned it off for this podcast. It's a very unique thing to work with. I'll be honest with you. It's the flavor is so aside from other types of cacao that it's almost difficult to compare, to be honest with you. Very, very fruity one. Almond, definitely. This 90% right now, at its stages right now, actually has notes for me of cashew and sesame. It's something very, very unique. It doesn't have the polyphenols and the anthocyanin levels that typical cacaos would, the darkness that comes with that and the bitterness that comes with that. It does have a fair bit of acidity inherent, but it doesn't have a lot of the traditional quote unquote cocoa flavors. That said, in the process of getting to learn about this bean, I did a couple of first iterations. I did a 70%, which is on the shelf. I did a 68% dark, which was actually the very first thing I made. And it wasn't the direction I was wanting to go, but it was the first shot. So I took it, I was like, this is interesting. I'm going to shelve it. 9 months later, after aging, it's found a balance that has seemed to really work. And so in this collection, the 68 is actually a darker color, a richer, a little bit more Maillard, a little bit more cocoa note than the 70 is because of the roasting and the way it was handled. And it's after 9.5 months, it's aged into something really very special, I think. And so you have the 70%, which is pretty direct. It's very fruity. Some people talk about alcohol, like a gin. For me, it's got an interesting caramel finish with a bit of vanilla that comes through. Once again, especially as it's aged. These were both made back in January, and they're very vibrant now still. Now, this 90% that we just finished, it probably won't go into bar form for another week or so to allow it to really harmonize and mellow, allow some of those strong acids that really sit on the back end. Once the acetic acid comes off on the front, that's the easy part to get rid of. It's about finding balance with the other acidic profiles that are in there, and so that it doesn't become over-dominant. And that just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of massage and caring. And so what we're going to do with that is we're going to have a plain 90% for people who are excited about low sugar profiles.
When is it going to be ready, Damion?
I mean, 90%? Technically it's ready now, but I'd say it's probably going to be ready in a week. I'd say it's probably when it's going to be edible and ready to be put into bar form. It'll probably be next Friday.
Yeah, now we're seeing the images of the packaging. Okay.
And I just want to say that you can order these online at www.cacao.com. If you don't live in New York, if you live in New York, we would love to have you in our Brooklyn store.
Yes, so yes, we are actually open. A lot of people ask us this. The store is open. We are open from Tuesdays to Sundays. We're closed on Mondays. And one of the things that I personally love is the fact that no matter which day of the week you visit the store, you can see the chocolate making process in one of its many phases. People often think that making chocolate is the easy part in this whole process, but it isn't. It's very complicated in itself. And as we move forward with these episodes, you guys will learn more about the behind the chocolate bar, not just behind the entire cacao process. So this will be, really cool as an educative.
And the next episodes will get more and more complicated and interesting and resourceful.
Exactly. It's part of our goal of education. Education is super important for us as a company, and we really want to show people and for people to learn about the cacao and chocolate industry.
We need an educated consumer. The entire market needs the consumer to be more and more educated so that he can ask and demand for higher quality raw material and a more honest craftsmanship by the industry and the chocolate makers.
I would say that when the consumer is educated, people value more the product. And so this is something that's high up in our agenda.
I think we should go on with the tasting.
Yeah.
Damion, you're in your hands.
I guess I'm up again.
Yeah.
All right. So
take it away.
There we go. So I guess let's start with Esmeralda. We spent a bit of time talking about that. And once again, now it's, Max's explanation about some of the history behind the genetics that are there coming in from the 70s from Trinidad and stuff like that actually answers or fills in certain questions I had, blanks I had in my mind about the flavor. Because for that region, that Duarte province, I guess the Bejucos technically, that subdivision, I find that the flavor Esmeralda to be a little atypical from some of the surrounding stuff. I mean, it's got a fair bit of fruit in it, but not as fruit forward as our Bejucos or Ramanal bean might be, the Tireo bean, our Duarte bean, also all from the same general larger province. And while the fruit is there, it's got a core of cocoa and chocolate a little bit more forward and dominant than some of the others. Maybe that is the explanation. I've always found it to be just like slightly left of center in terms of typical flavor. And the second generation of this bar, I think really hits the mark pretty well. I don't think my first generation was too bad, what we were doing here, but, it's always fun to expand, make it even better. And what's interesting, I think, machinery plays a lot, process plays a lot in the flavor. I know we're working with the same exact beans, and there's so much bigger process than our small concept here. But at our 67%, I think it packs as much flavor as their 75. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I think, for us right now, it's interesting. This Esmeralda, the way it's sitting, has got really great fruit, a very delicate acidity off the back end, not too punchy, a small amount of astringency that, we classify as sort of like a cedar note. So there's a woodsy note in there, and there's a really well-balanced harmony in all of that. That's really, really quite pleasant. I'm very happy with this iteration. I'm happy with the roast profile. With flavor and chocolate, once you get to this stage of the game, and obviously in fermentation, we'll talk a lot about flavor development on the post-harvest side, but once you get to the processing of chocolate, the cacao, the roasting is, in my opinion, like the only stage that actually gives flavor. And it develops flavor. The conching and aging and processing and other stuff, they're all reductive systems, where you're either taking acid with moistures out or you're balancing and softening, but you're not giving anything. You're just playing with what came out of the roast and the fermentation and the genetics and the stuff that came before.
And
the roasting is really...
Tell me about the conching. How long are you conching our Esmeralda?
Well,
does it need much conching or not?
No, less than 24 hours. About 23 hours of conching. Obviously, depending on batch size, bigger batches need more conching, but the way this is processed, 20 kilos is within the 22 to 24 range, something like that, depending on fluctuations in temperature, in the heating, and whatnot. We generally conch in the mid-60s internal temp, and that really does a lot. That does a lot to really push off that initial acetic acid, the residual moisture. And then in the sort of like the last third of the conching process is about massaging and really, bringing it all together.
Do you want to show us the Esmeralda bar now that you have it there?
I would like to see the La Esmeralda chocolate bar, maybe next to the La Magdalena, to see the distinction
if we can see the difference in color.
If you want to,
you want me to open it up?
Yeah, and also taste it. I want to see your face.
I'll pay for them. Don't worry. This is all for the purpose of the podcast. So Because we've been talking about it so much, but it might be
Right.
cool to see them side by side.
Right.
So we have the La Esmeralda, which is 67%, and then we'll see La Magdalena, 70%.
Yeah, it's really quite phenomenal, the color difference. I mean, the 70% really looks like a 40% milk, maybe even a 38, which is a pretty typical number for professional chefs to use.
I thought, the first time I saw it, I thought you were lying to me, because this does look
Everyone
like
thinks
a
it's a
milk
milk
chocolate
chocolate.
bar, yeah.
So I don't know if the lighting really does this justice, but you can see them back to back. Like, can you tell the difference? Can you see?
Oh, yeah, hold it closer to the camera, yeah.
Colder?
Oh, yeah, right there.
So
Yeah, you can see the
tell?
slight difference in color. In person,
Yeah,
I think
probably.
you'll see it better, but you can see it.
Right. I mean, obviously, I can adjust the lighting here and stuff like that, but it's really phenomenal. I mean, it's really amazing, the color. And, the Magdalena is so unique that, as Max once explained to me, the composition of the cocoa butter itself is different, and it's very, very soft.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really need much work. It doesn't need much addition. If you're a fan of putting extra cocoa butter in, it doesn't need much of that at all, because the cocoa butter itself is of a softer variety, like significantly softer. And the first time I processed it, and I was getting to a certain stage, and I was texting back and forth with Alberto, who's part of the quality control team, the head of that down there, and we were both going back and forth, exchanging ideas about it. I was like, wow, this is really quite amazing how soft this chocolate is. Even in its liquid stage, and the way it was flowing in the machine, it was very noticeable how different the cocoa butter composition is. And so it's once again, like I said, it's a very unique thing to work with. It maybe isn't for everybody. Some people want that very typical, cocoa flavor that basically the whole planet has been geared towards understanding, that's based off of a West African profile. But what's exciting about here is, because of the open concept, people come in, and a lot of people are not familiar with fruit-forward chocolate. And so it's always interesting being able to give them samples and just to see the expression change. It could be surprising. You can literally see like the eyebrows go up and curl in the side of the mouth. It's like, wow, this is different. I've never had this. And there's a couple of beans and chocolates on there that are rather contentious. There are people that love them, but the flavors are so unique that some people are like, no. It's just too different. And some people are like, wow, that's so different.
I loved going to trade shows when we still didn't have like our official packaging, and just having people try these chocolates, and they were just like you said, raising their eyebrows like crazy. So I think we kind of have to wrap it up for this first episode.
Well,
So-
we
There's
forgot
so much to
mention
talk about.
there's something we should at least give 30 seconds to the poor Tireo. We didn't
Yes.
mention anything about the taste. Please, Damion.
I'm gonna eat
Give
it
us
right
a
now.
closing statement on Tireo.
I mean, today was
Look at him
great,
eating
honestly.
away his chocolate. We're very
When
jealous
people
right
come
now.
in and we explain, the Dominican nature, the family, what's going on, what the agenda is, and representation of the Dominican cacao, the history, and both the contemporary nature of the business. And a lot of people, a very common question is, well, what you would feel to be like the most typical Dominican flavor? And I often point them towards Tireo. It's got a lot of the elements that I find to be most typical. You can process out fruit and you can process out acids and stuff, but left, semi-massage, you get big notes of that. Subtle notes of green olive, very, very common depending on the processing. It's got a good chocolate base, some wood in there, a little bit of a dryness from that woodiness, a little spicy on the edge. I think this is one of my favorites here. From a bean perspective, it's definitely one of my favorites.
Very well.
Great.
Great 30 seconds for Tireo.
Not
Well,
bad, I'm shrinking it down.
so I want to thank Max, Nadia, and Damion for speaking to us about our tremendous single estate chocolates and everything that is behind these chocolate bars. So hopefully you guys will be able to try it. You can also purchase these online at cacao.com. You can go to our online store. We also have our single estate bundle available. And you can also follow us on social media. We are at cacao, that's KAHKOW _USA. Cacao is a one-stop shop for chocolate makers and chocolate lovers in quest of the finest ingredients for their creations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.